Hello, this is Ms. DB. In this video we are going to go over how to multiply and divide integers. So remember that integers are the set of whole numbers and their opposites. There isn't a good way on a number line to show multiplication or division with integers, so we're not going to do that. We're not going to use a gizmo or a number line to do it. We're going to go right to the rules. The product or quotient of a positive or negative integer is negative. So product means multiplying. Put a time sign up there. And quotient means dividing. So when you multiply or divide integers, if one of them is positive and one of them is negative, it's negative. The product or quotient of two negative or two positive integers is positive. And if there are more than two integers, count the number of negative signs. So if there's an even number of negative signs, the answer is positive. If there's an odd number of negative signs, the answer is negative. This part right here works for even if you only have two numbers. If there's an even number would be 2 or 4 or 0, then the answer is positive, or any multiple of 2 after that. If it's an odd number of negatives, like 1 or 3 or 5, then the answer is negative. You may have seen it written like this. A negative, let's start with plus. A positive times a positive is positive. A negative times a negative is positive. A negative times a positive is negative. A positive times a negative is negative. So if you want to use that shortcut method of the rules, you can. You can use a calculator to check your answers on these. I tried to keep the answers or the numbers fairly small so you could try to do them in your head if you know your multiplication facts. But if you want to check them, I am absolutely perfectly fine with that. Alright, number 1 is a negative 3 times a negative 6. If you have a negative times a negative, you will get a positive integer. The product or quotient of two negative integers fits into that part. Or you can see it right here. So my answer will be positive something, and then you multiply the 3 and the 6 together to get 18. So this would be positive 18. How about something like number 4 where there's 3 numbers being multiplied? First multiply the first 2 numbers, and we'll worry about the signs after we multiply. So 3 times 5 would be 15, and then we have a 6, so that might be a little bit hard to do in your head. 15 times 6. 5 times 6 is 30. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 3 more is 90. So if I would ignore all the signs, I would get 90. But I would get it wrong because I do need to worry about the signs. I had a negative times a negative, that would be positive 15. And I was multiplying that by a negative 6. Well, a positive times a negative is negative. So my answer will be negative 90. Or I can use the rule that there is an odd number of negative signs. There is 1, 2, 3 negatives. That's odd, so my answer should be negative. How about some division problems? If you are going to divide, then the rules are the same. So even though I wrote the rules for multiplication on the side, these rules would also be true for division. If you take a positive number divided by a positive number, it will be positive. If you take a negative number divided by a negative number, it will also be positive. If you take a negative divided by a positive, that is negative. If you take a positive divided by a negative, that is also negative. So you have an odd number of negatives, your answer is negative. If you have a positive number of negatives, your answer will be positive. So in number 9, I have 2 negatives. My answer should be positive. 36 divided by 3 is 12. The answer will be positive because I have a negative divided by a negative, which is right here, and that's a positive number for an answer. Remember, when you do something like number 10, when there's 3 numbers, go in order from left to right. So the first part you would do is negative 45 divided by negative 3. and then you take that answer and divide it by positive 5 to get your result. So there's some more practice. All of them are either all multiplying or all dividing except for number 11. Look at number 11, it's a little different. Number 11, first you multiply 9 times negative 2 and then you divide. That's the only one where there's two operations happening at the same time. Next week though, we will look at problems where they're mixed together. Alright, next up we are going to multiply algebraic expressions. To multiply algebraic expressions, what you do is you multiply the numbers in front of the variables. Those are called coefficients. And then you multiply the variables together. When you multiply two different variables by each other, you just write them down next to each other. X times y equals xy. That's all you do. And we're not going to do any where you multiply two of the same variable together because that gets into exponents and we're not going to do that yet. So look at the example, 4x times negative 3y. When you multiply the coefficients, 4 times negative 3, you get negative 12. When you multiply x times y, you get x times y. So you just write negative 12xy. Really, the only work here is multiplying the numbers in front, the coefficients, and then writing the variables after it. So in 28, no, let's do 26. In 26, we're going to multiply the coefficients. The coefficients are negative 4 times negative 6. When we multiply those together, a negative times a negative is positive, and 4 times 6 is 24, so we get positive 24. But negative 4x times negative 6y, we can't ignore the x and y, so we just write them after our 24. So our answer for 26 is 24xy. So what we're doing is practicing using more variables in our work so that when we get to more and more algebra, you're familiar with all these variables too. The last section that you have to do, you only need to choose 2 of these problems below. There's 4 of them, you only need to do 2. And you can read through them and decide. They all have something to do with money, so that's interesting. Let's look at 32. Katie withdrew a total of $300 from her bank account over the last 5 weeks. How much money did she withdraw each week? So the 300 was all together if she added them all up. But an easier way than adding 5 times would be to, she could multiply 5 times. But this is going to be a division problem to find the answer. So 300 is the total amount that she took out of her bank account over the last 5 weeks. So I wrote it like a fraction, 300 over 5, which is one way to show division. You can also write it using the division symbol. And the other way that you can write it, especially if you are typing, is with the backslash key, like that. All of those methods show division. And then all you would have to do is to find the answer in order to answer the question. We could have also wrote an equation for this, which is kind of what I'm itching to do. I could have said that 5 weeks times some amount, I don't know the amount, I'm going to call it M, some amount of money. If I multiply those, I would have gotten $300. So then I would know to divide in order to solve this, and that's what I did up above, was show the different ways that you could write dividing by 5. And when you get your answer in a word problem, you should label it. This is going to be dollar signs because we're talking about money. So put $sign on your answer when you're done. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you very much.